facial recognition technology. So I'm going to put you in a hypothetical situation. Try and imagine. You are a middle-aged man in Detroit, Michigan. It's a nice January evening. You're getting ready to come home from work. When you get a call out of nowhere, it's your wife who lets you know that a police officer just called requesting you turn yourself in. You get another call from the police, but honestly, you think it's a prank. They won't tell you why they want you to come in, and you are a law-abiding citizen. You have no idea why the police would want to talk to you. So you go home to your wife and two daughters, and then there's suddenly a Detroit police car which speeds up around the back of your car in case you try and make a run for it. An officer is getting out. You turn to your kids and tell them you're going to be back in a minute. They watch you get handcuffed, directed into the police car, and driven away to the Detroit Detention Center. So as you can imagine, this is pretty traumatizing, and the reason for this entire event, as we will see in a minute, is facial recognition technology. So what is that, and how did it incriminate you? It's used to identify individuals by mapping someone's facial features from a photo or video and comparing that with database information. So that database information would be like mugshots, or in this case, driver license pictures. There are a lot of different ways to use this technology. The main one is e-commerce. So companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google will use it for targeted advertising. Likewise, a lot of medical institutions use it to diagnose certain disorders and to identify people as well. Main use that we're going to be talking about is law enforcement. So it's used to scan crowds for watchless people in concerts, sports stadiums, restricted areas, and airports. So as we can see, in green means that it uses facial recognition technology now. And nearly 100 countries used facial recognition services for policing in 2020. It's a very fast-growing industry, and it's so fast-growing that, in fact, it's been adopted so quickly that there are very few rules and regulations, especially in the United States. So my argument is that the use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement should be regulated at a federal level. And then the first reason that this is important is that, okay, so I'm going to go back to our story real fast to illustrate this reason. So after 24 hours of police custody, the police look at the evidence more closely, they check your alibi, and they realize their facial recognition software made a mistake. So finally they release you. This is but you just had 24 hours of not knowing, and of confusion, and your family didn't have you for 24 hours, and also this was your kid's first experience with the police. So this is kind of a deeply traumatic experience that did not need to happen. It's also a waste of the time and resources of the police department in Detroit. And this actually happened, okay, to a man named Robert Williams. This is his family, and it happened in January of 2020, so just about like a year ago. And so, is this technology accurate? Is this just an isolated incident? So no, there have been two other, like, kind of more publicized mistakes due to this technology that have happened since then, and there's also a study run by the ACLU in 2018 that ran U.S. Congress members' official portraits as well as 25,000 mugshots through Amazon's Rekognition facial recognition software, and 28 lawmakers were mistaken for arrested criminals. This was also technology that was being heavily marketed to law enforcement agencies at the time. So as we can say, it definitely makes mistakes, and those should be taken into account, and it's often treated like it's perfect when it's not. Another issue is that it disproportionately misidentifies vulnerable minorities. The margin of error notably increases in frequency with darker skin tones, with women, with disabled people, and with certain age groups. So with this ACLU study that I was talking about 40% of the Amazon system's false positives occurred with people of color, despite the fact that they make up only a fifth of the U.S. Congress. These are the false positives, and as we can see, it's very disproportionate. Likewise, so it's also important to bring up the question of, even if a facial recognition system had 100% accuracy with every demographic, would this present ethical concerns? And yes, it would. So the first issue is a lack of informed consent. So, fun fact, you have a 50% chance of being in a government database of pictures, of your picture is stored in there. And you probably don't know, and that lack of knowledge means that if they're doing something with it, if they're using it for some purpose, you don't know, and you can't challenge those possible misuses, and there's really, like, you don't know what they're doing. And so it's kind of, a lot of people say it's a threat to democracy, And there's actually another reason why some people say it's a threat to democracy. Some cite the chilling effect, which is the fear of identification, which can cause paranoia that hurts freedom of assembly and that hurts like public life in general. So we know that privacy is a really important part of people's psychological well-being, and to feel like you're being watched all the time is not it's not really good for people, and it causes people to behave differently and to avoid public places and things like that. So the next question is, why should this be a federally addressed issue? So so far it's just been like a local thing. Some states, as you can see, are banning it. Some cities are banning it. Others have like no regulations at all. And this is kind of the issue, is that so for instance, Detroit, Michigan has no regulation whatsoever. This is the city in which the Robert Williams story took place. So we want to make sure that everyone kind of gets these crucial rights, and that everyone can get these protections, because it's really important and because it's just really inconsistent as it is right now. So the second reason is it actually might provide better legislation to do this at a federal level. As we can see, local policies are typically either non-existent, or they focus on limiting and restricting the technology, so like an all-out ban, rather than offering like guidelines. So the reason that we don't want all-out bans is because this technology is still really, really useful for police forces, and it has a lot of uses that people typically don't dispute. One of those is identifying missing children, and another is identifying violent hostile criminals. And those are criminals for whom it is definitely worthwhile, and it's kind of worth it to have false positives because they're such a danger to society. So for instance, there was a mass shooting suspect at Capital Gazette newspaper in June of 2018 that was quickly identified using the software. His biometric facial data compared with millions of state and federal photographs. So this is an example of everything gone right, kind of. And that it's really important that we can use this tool. So what can we do? The thing is, we can vote, and we can also talk to our representatives in Congress and talk to lawmakers. But the thing is, we want to know what kind of laws we're looking for and what we want to see in legislation. What's our ideal? What we want to be voting for. So the first is police training requirement. That's a really important one. Second is privacy. The legislation has to introduce some kind of limit to what federal government can do with facial data. There's already something about privacy, like a federal law about privacy, but it has a lot of loopholes. So we want something more comprehensive that limits the amount of limits how the government can use photographs that's already compiled, maybe even. And then also, there are accuracy tests. So the tricky thing with accuracy and with determining accuracy is that we don't really have a standardized test, but we would like to kind of see that in the future. That would be really helpful. However, there are some ways that legislation can kind of make sure that this technology is being used properly. One of those is differing thresholds based on percentage likelihood. This is something we want to see in legislation. And what this means is, so facial recognition algorithms don't provide definitive yes or no results. They speak in percentages, so maybe there's like an 80% chance that a person shown on a security footage is also someone from a watch list. So a good law regulating this technology has to kind of have some system of thresholds. So higher than 80% means you can do this and this and this, et cetera, et cetera. Second is that it has to take into account the risk associated with the criminal. So really dangerous individuals have a different threshold than, a watch thief. Okay, and then third is this legislation has to have accuracy assessments adjusted for different population groups. So if we know that it's really inaccurate with African American disabled women, then it's going to be a totally different threshold than with other demographics. So, and finally, the quality of the image has to be taken into account. So the number of pixels between the eyes or whatever. These all influence how good your results are going to be. And so a good law should kind of regulate all of those things and kind of set a threshold that is okay for all of those things. And that will be how you know that it kind of has addressed these things and is informed. And so we really want something that can both protect us and keep us safe as much as possible, while also not harming our privacy and prioritizing our psychological well-being as much as possible. And these are my sources, and thank you so much for watching.